They stood like statues among stars, cloaked in flowing robes and bathed in borrowed light. Guardians of destiny who promised peace but delivered silence, revered by many, questioned by few. The Jedi were never challenged because they never allowed it, and that is where the cracks began to form. They weren't symbols of hope. They were monuments to stagnation. They told us to let go of what made us human, to fear, love, and bury grief, to quiet joy and sever sorrow. They claimed enlightenment came from detachment. But detachment is just another word for numbness, and numbness has never saved a soul. They confuse stillness with wisdom, but silence can be just as deadly as noise. They walked above the suffering of the galaxy. Speaking in riddles while children died in battlefields, they helped create. Their council halls echoed with logic but lacked empathy. They saw visions of pain and chose inaction. They saw darkness rise and still believed themselves the light. They were too proud to admit that sometimes the light casts shadows too. For too long we celebrated them without asking why, because myths are easier than reality, and robes look cleaner than armor soaked in blood. But the truth is not kind. It does not glow blue in the dark. The truth is jagged and sharp, and sounds like a voice saying no more. They were legends built on omission, not honesty. We lost Anakin not to power, but to isolation. We lost Ahsoka not to anger, but to abandonment. We lost the Jedi because they lost themselves. In tradition, in doctrine, in 1,000 silent rules meant to protect, but only ever imprisoned. Their fall wasn't tragic because it was sudden. It was tragic because it was inevitable. In this video, we're going to pull back the veil and expose the rot beneath the temple walls. We'll explore how the Jedi Order's refusal to change destroyed everything they swore to defend. We'll dissect the myth, confront the mistakes, and ask if the galaxy would have been better without them at all. Because maybe the real danger wasn't the dark side, but the blind faith we placed in the ones who claimed to fight it. For years, we saw them as peacekeepers, cloaked in robes, wielding light, promising balance in a galaxy drowning in chaos. They called themselves protectors, defenders of life, guardians of truth. But if you peel back the myth, if you really listen, something darker emerges. What if the Jedi weren't heroes at all? Their code was not a symbol of wisdom, but a cage of denial. Love forbidden, attachment condemned, emotion repressed like poison in the blood. They trained children to abandon their past, erase their fears, and silence their instincts. What kind of order teaches you to sever your humanity in order to find peace? What kind of peace is that? They claimed to reject power, but sat atop the galaxy's throne as advisors and warriors alike. They meddled in wars, propped up corrupt systems, and called it justice. Their temples reached into the clouds, while entire worlds crumbled below. The Jedi didn't serve the people. They served the illusion of control. And yet we believed them. Because legends are easy to trust, and robes are easy to worship. Their lightsabers glowed like beacons in the dark. But light can blind as easily as it guides. We never stopped to ask who gave them the right. So what happens when the ones you trusted to bring peace only bring silence? What happens when heroes aren't who they seem? What happens when the real danger was never the Sith, but the ones claiming to be above them? They sat in golden chambers while the galaxy burned. They debated ethics while children became soldiers and systems fell to ruin. Every plea for help became a footnote in another council meeting. Every war was another chance to push their ideals, not protect the innocent. They took Anakin as a boy and told him not to love. They saw visions of war and waited. Not to prevent it, but to maintain their image. They knew Palpatine was rising and still clung to protocol, procedure, their precious code. It was never about what was right, only what was permitted. And when things spiraled beyond control, they blamed the ones who suffered most. They called Ahsoka a traitor because she wouldn't bow to their broken system. They shunned her for daring to feel betrayed, for daring to be human. How many more were cast out for not fitting the mold? The Jedi didn't fall because of betrayal. They collapsed under the weight of their own pride. Their refusal to evolve, to listen, to see the galaxy as it was, not as they wished it to be, was their undoing. They built their temple on arrogance, and it sank into the dust. There's a sadness buried beneath the silence they left behind. A sorrow wrapped in temples turned to ruins, and names whispered in regret. The Jedi wanted peace, but they never understood suffering. They wanted order, but never knew compassion. They trained Obi-Wan to be a warrior, but never taught him how to grieve. They raised Anakin to fight for justice, but never let him mourn his mother. They saw pain and turned away. They saw love and called it weakness. They saw emotion and labeled it danger. Even the brightest among them Yodamace, Windu became shadows of what they could have been. Not mentors, but gatekeepers. Not teachers, but judges. Their eyes were always closed, even as they claimed to see the Force clearly. And when it mattered most, they couldn't see it all. The tragedy of the Jedi isn't just in their fall. It's in the children they failed, the friends they lost, the futures they never allowed to grow, the clones they used as pawns, the worlds they left behind, the choices they made, masked in peace, dripping in quiet ruin. And now their names live on, not as saviors, but as echoes of a system that broke more than it healed. They are ghosts now, not because they died, but because they forgot how to live. Still, there was something breathtaking about them, something undeniably powerful. The way they moved, the way the Force bent around their presence. They were more than warriors. They were symbols, icons sculpted in myth and motion. To see a Jedi draw their blade was to witness poetry in combat, a dance between conviction and discipline, light and death. They stood alone against armies. They faced darkness with nothing but their will, and for a moment it was easy to believe. There were glimpses of greatness, of what the Jedi could have been. Qui-Gon Jinn, who followed the Force instead of the Council. Ahsoka Tano, who chose empathy over obedience. Luke Skywalker, who threw away his weapon instead of striking in anger. These were the ones who cracked the mold, who showed that the Jedi were not defined by tradition, but by heart. They are the reason we still remember the name with reverence. They are the reason we still hope, because for all their faults, the Jedi also carried the seeds of something greater. Not just order, but understanding. Not just discipline, but harmony. Perhaps the Jedi were never meant to last. Not in their old form, not in temples of stone and silence, but in something softer, something more human. A future not built on control, but connection. The Force is not a weapon. It is a thread. It ties us all together, through fear and faith, through loss and love. And maybe the Jedi failed because they tried to own it, instead of share it. Hope doesn't come from rules. It comes from people willing to care, willing to change, willing to see the galaxy not in black and white, but in all its fractured, beautiful color. A new order could rise. One without dogma, without division. One where a Jedi can love, can cry, can grow without shame. One where light is not purity, but honesty. Where darkness is not rejection, but recovery. The Jedi were the past, but what comes next? That could be something the galaxy has never seen before. Something true, something whole. In the end, the Jedi were not evil, but they were wrong. They weren't villains, but they weren't the heroes we thought either. They were lost in their own reflection, consumed by their own echo. They believed peace meant stillness, but peace without emotion is emptiness. They believed order meant obedience, but order without justice is tyranny. They believed light meant suppression, but light without warmth is just cold. Their fall wasn't one moment. It was 1,000 silent choices. It was every child denied love, every truth left unspoken, every pain left untouched. And by the time the darkness came, they had no strength left to stop it. Yet maybe their greatest failure was the belief they could not fail. That blindness, that certainty, is what doomed them. And what we must never forget. Because the next time we choose our protectors, the next time we build something sacred, we must remember this story. We must ask the questions they never did. And we must never confuse silence with peace. Never mistake tradition for truth. Never let history repeat its quiet, devastating fall.